Please sit down.
Amen. Our scripture reading this morning is found in Ephesians chapter 6, and May is going to read verses 1 to 4 for us. Ephesians chapter 6, we're looking at verses 1 to 4, and then kids, I'm going to have some special instructions for you after that, okay? So Ephesians 6, verses 1 to 4. Amen. Thank you, May. So, since we're talking to children this morning, I thought it would be good to incorporate our normal children's talk into the sermon. What do you think? So, kids, you don't need your folders today, but I'm going to ask you to come up here, okay? So, kids, if you can come and sit in these first two rows, that would be great. Anyone sitting on this side, you have to behave yourself because Miss Kathy is right there. Anyone sitting on this side? Yeah, Kathy and Jane on that side. So the naughty kids over on that side. Oh, I'm just kidding. Yep. So tuck those under your chair, Bella, so you can pay attention, okay? Good job. Excellent. I like it. And Josh, you can see me, right? Eli, are you going to stay back there? Okay, I like your new glasses, buddy. Those look very, very studious. And I see a couple of other, we won't call you guys kids because you're too old to be kids, but you do kind of fall into this category. You can stay where you are. Okay, we're going to start off today by playing a little game of Simon Says. All right? You guys know how to play Simon Says, right? Robert, do you know how to play Simon Says? You can stay seated if you want. You don't have to play. But the rest of you guys have to play, okay? Ready? Simon Says, stand up. Okay, go ahead and sit back down. Oh, that was quick. All right, Simon Says, touch your nose. Okay, Simon Says, touch your other nose. You haven't got another nose? All right, well, Simon Says, touch your ears. Okay, put one hand down. Oh, that was close, Jack. All right, Simon Says, pat your head. Okay, go ahead and sit down while you're patting your head. Well, you guys are pretty good. Yeah, okay. Simon Says, stop patting your head. Okay, fix my hair. Okay. Simon Says, stand on one leg. Oh. Simon Says, stand on two legs. What was that? You barely lifted your leg up. All right, Simon Says, turn around. Okay, you can stop. Oh, yeah. All right, you guys can all sit down. That's pretty good. You guys all did really well. No, stay here, Luke. I'm not done with you yet, buddy. All right, so the whole point of Simon Says is to teach you to obey, isn't it? Arabella, have a seat. Arabella, have a seat. We're talking about obedience now. Good job. How do you know when you don't have to obey in Simon Says? When they don't say Simon Says, right? Well, there are, in this world, some adults that you don't have to obey. Right? In fact, there are adults in this world who only intend to do you harm. We have an enemy, if we're Christians, and that enemy only ever wants to hurt us. And there are adults in this world who only ever want to hurt you as children. You don't have to obey them. Just like when we're playing Simon Says, if we don't say Simon Says, you don't do it. Right? But how do you know when you do have to obey in Simon Says? Jack, do you know that one? When I say Simon Says, actually. You know what? If only it was that easy to learn who you had to obey and who you didn't have to obey. So if someone came up to you and says, David, Simon says, let's go get a hamburger. And you know if they say Simon Says, you can trust that person. But they don't, do they? In fact, sometimes it's really hard to know who to obey and who not to obey. Well, today, we're going to talk about some of the adults that you do have to listen to all the time. Well, I'm not actually listed in those, but there are some adults that you do have to listen to all the time. And they are called your parents. Now, pay close attention, because these are the words of God, and He expects certain things from you. It's not too difficult to understand, but sometimes it can be very hard to do. So, parents, pay close attention, because there are two very important commands to you in this passage. Make sure you listen to them, okay? So the first group of people we're going to talk about are children and parents. Are you listening back there, Eli? Can you see the screen with your new glasses? Excellent. That's great. So first it says, children, and some of you out there, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise, that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. It's really quite simple. Remember last week we talked about husbands and wives, how husbands have to love their wives and cherish them. And wives, what did they have to do? Who remembers? What do wives have to do, according to last week's passage? Oh, Arabella? Yeah, I think. Submit. And we talked about that. We talked a lot about that. Well, here's the command to the other group in the family. We have dads, we have moms, we have children. Your job is to obey your parents. Obey means to do as you're told, just like when we're playing Simon Says. If your parents are telling you that you should stop talking, what should you do? Stop talking. Should you finish your sentence first and then stop talking? I see a lot of people nodding their heads, but I don't think that's the right answer. If the parent says, stop talking, you don't say, you know what, I'm halfway through a sentence. You can wait for a few minutes. Let me get this out. That's not obeying. You might think, I haven't finished the thoughts that are going on in my head yet. Let me express myself before I stop. That's not obeying. If your parents say, stop talking, that means, done. We'll finish the sentence later. Right? Is there a time when it would be okay for you to finish talking? If your parents say stop talking. When they're done with me. Well, maybe. I'm thinking more of an emergency. If David is coming to Mom because Luke is hanging out the window and about to fall down, and David says, Mom, Luke is doing something, well, it's really, and Mom is on the phone, and she says, David, I'm trying to talk. That might be a time when it's okay for you to interrupt. But that's an emergency. That's not just because I want to finish my sentence or get my thoughts out. If your parents tell you to clean your room, what should you do? Where is Zeke today? Zeke's not well. How appropriate is that on this day that he would not be feeling well? You should clean your room, right? If they tell you to clean your... So if your mom and dad say, Jack, time to go clean your room, or if they say, it's time for you to go clean your room, and you go in there and you think, I should pick, oh, this is my favorite. Oh, I'm going to sit down and play with this for a little while. And then you put that over there, and then you go over here and you say, I should pick this up. Look, there's these two, my favorite toys. I'm going to play with them together. Is that clean your room? No, but is that pretty easy to do? Sometimes you thought you were headed to do the right thing, and all of a sudden you're caught up doing something totally different. If your parents say you should eat peas, what should you do? Should you put them in your nose? No. Should you put them in your ears? Should you hide them under a sausage so they can't see them? No. Luke's looking at me like, who would ever do something like that? No. If your parents tell you to eat peas.
But only if you eat it.
Right. So you should eat your peas if you're told to eat your peas, right?
You must get it rewarded.
All right. Stick with me, Jack. If you're told to take a bath, take a bath. Should you cry first? Should you put on your parts first? Should you go and hide somewhere and maybe your mom thinks you took a bath? No, you should take a... Well, but should it matter? Hang on, Jack. Hang on. Hang on, buddy. Hang on. I know. And it is fun to do... It's nice to do things that are fun when you're told to do them. But what if you're told to do something that's not fun? You should still do it, right? That's what obedience is. Well, these things aren't hard. These are not difficult. But there are some things that are much more difficult to do when parents tell you to do them, aren't there? And we're going to talk about those in a minute. Well, obedience is more than what just happens on the outside. In other words, just because you cleaned your room or ate your peas or took a bath, that doesn't mean that you have done everything that God expects you to do. Because look what else the Bible says. Obey your parents and honor your father and mother. That's different than obeying. Obedience means I just did what I was told to do. Honoring my father and my mother, that's a different story. To honor means more than just to obey. The word actually means to value or to prize. In other words, you should think of your parents as being valuable to you like a prize, like somebody has given you something extremely worthwhile. And that person who has given your parents to you is God. And he has given them as a prize to you. You should think highly of them. This means that when they tell you to do something, or when they tell you not to do something, they should be doing it as though God were doing it. They should be saying to you the things that God would be saying to you, because they are a prize to you from God. And it says that you should obey your parents in the Lord. Now stay with me, parents, because I'm coming after you next regarding this passage. So, if your parents tell you to do something that you don't want to do, right? Does that ever happen? And you immediately get sad? And you immediately want to cry? Or you immediately want to do your own thing, right? If you honor your parents, you will think they are doing this for my good. They are saying the things to me that God would say to me. So if I don't like it, and if I don't want to do it, just doing it hasn't fixed the problem. I've got to change my thinking. And I've got to realize, so they're asking me to eat peas even though I don't like peas. They're asking me to take a bath even though I prefer showers. They're asking me to clean my room even though my favorite cartoon is on. But what they're asking me to do is for my best. So therefore, I need to not just do it, I need to change the way I think about doing it. And I need to realize this is a good thing for me. Even though I personally don't like it, it's a good thing for me. So I think I will try and train my brain to like it after all. Well, it says to you, you should obey your parents in the Lord. I'm coming to the end of my bit with you guys. Everyone I read, and parents, you need to pay attention to this part as well. Every commentator I read says it should be parents in the Lord, the way it's written up there. Not parents, comma, in the Lord. Okay? So, in other words, excuse me, it's the other way around. It should be parents, comma, in the Lord, not parents in the Lord. Because these guys do not have to obey all of their adults in the church the same way they do their parents. They're not parents in the Lord. I'm not your dad in the Lord, or your dad in the Lord. That's not what it's talking about. It says you should obey your parents in the Lord. What that means is they are acting on behalf of God for you. Now, parents, are you listening? You need to take this very, very seriously. You have a solemn duty to require only things of your children that God would require. So you have to ask yourself, is what I am asking my children to do or not to do exactly the things that God would ask them to do or not to do? Now, it can be very difficult. How many of you guys have a tablet or a phone or a laptop or access to one of those things? Yeah. Your parents probably didn't when they were your age. And so they didn't go through the same things that you go through. I'm not going to ask this question. I'm going to ask this question, but I don't want you to answer it. I just want you to think about it. I'll bet there are things, even at your young age, that you've seen on a laptop or a tablet or a phone or possibly even the TV that you know you probably shouldn't have seen. Words that you've read that you know you probably shouldn't have read. Those are problems that most of us parents didn't have to deal with when we were their age. But they do. And there's not a lot of specific advice in the Bible about how to deal with the internet. But there are principles. And parents, we need to take those seriously. We are standing in God's place for our children. The things that we ask them to do should be the things that God asks them to do. And the things that we say, you should not be doing that, are the things that God himself would say, you shouldn't be doing that. They are not helpful. If you need a first step to understand that, think of the Hippocratic Oath. The first line, the most important part, says, do no harm. That's a doctor's responsibility, to never, ever do harm to a patient. Parents, that should be us. Never, ever do harm to our children. If we are raising them in the Lord, using God as an example for how he treats his children, we should never do them harm. You wouldn't see a bus coming down the road and shove your child out in front of it, would you? If you were on a cruise ship, you wouldn't dangle them over the edge of the ship, would you? Well, your dad might, Luke, but no, I'm kidding. But the point is, we would never physically do harm to our children as parents, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. As we're training them up, we should treat them exactly the same. Never do anything that could cause them harm, because we are raising them in the Lord. That's our job. Right. I'm going to let you guys go back and sit with your parents, because I got a few more things to say to both of you. All right? So you grab all them, Arabella, quickly, because I think God would want you to have those. Go find your parents to sit with. And I'm going to finish this little section here. By the way, guys, you were amazing up here. Very well behaved. Now keep paying attention, all right? Kids, keep paying attention, because I'm not done talking to you yet, just because you're back there. Parents, when you require them to do chores around the house, I need you to answer a question in your mind. Is it because you're too lazy to do them yourself? Or is it because you want them to learn responsibilities? No, that's a rhetorical one. You don't have to answer that one. Think seriously about that. I know we used to kid around when our children were younger. We had 2 boys and a girl. We thought, this is great, because now dad doesn't have to do as much work. They can do some mowing, they can do some car cleaning, and we got a girl, she can do cooking and all these sorts of things. You know, one day, not too long ago, we asked Trevor, what's the most traumatic thing that ever happened in your life? Now, bearing in mind, we'd lived in a caravan for 3 years. We traveled all over America. They'd been in numerous schools. And I expected something like that, upping their roots in America, coming and to a totally strange place and trying to live in a place where they don't speak English, Scottish, and all these different things. And I expected something like that. And he actually didn't even hardly have to think about it. He said, I remember when I was about 12 years old, and you told me I had to wash the car. And I'm like, yeah? Well, that was the most traumatic thing that's ever happened to me. Wow. Seems like you had a pretty good life after all. But the point is, we don't know about the traumatic things that we are causing in our children's life. You need to ask yourself, are you asking them to do chores just because you feel like you've got some little tiny slaves around the house now? Or because this is going to be good for them. So just as they need to honor you and obey you for the right reasons, you need to tell them and raise them for the right reasons. If your child is misbehaving and they're embarrassing you, is that why you correct them? Let's be honest. There are times when we think, they're making me look awful, and I need to change that behavior. Or are we thinking, I need to change that behavior because that behavior is not good for them? Our motives as parents need to be just as right as our kids' motives. I wonder, as we think about doing the things for our children, raising them in the Lord, as though God were doing it himself, would God ever keep you from church? Do we? Do we keep them from church? It's a question we need to ask as parents, because we, as parents, are standing in the place of God when we raise our children. That's why they have to obey us, just like we have to obey God. If you are raising your children in the Lord, then they have no right to disobey you. But if you are raising them in the ways of the world, pay attention, I'm going to say this very slowly and very carefully. If you are raising your children in the Lord, they have no right to disobey you. But if you are raising them in the ways of the world, a godly child will understand that and see that, and I believe has the right to disobey. In other words, God does not condone rebellion, but he is never okay with sinful behavior, even in children. Why? Because this is right. This is right. It is right for a child to obey his parents, especially when they are doing it in the Lord. It is never right for a child to disobey their parents when their parents are doing what is right for them in God's eyes. Bearing in mind that parents have a pretty wide berth when it comes to what is right and what is wrong. They are given a wide berth, just like God is given a wide berth. And there are times when he has to teach us things and train us in ways that we think, why this? Because the lesson he's teaching us is patience and obedience and faith and trust. And those are things that, as parents, we need to teach our children. I'm not talking about trust games. I'm not talking about planting your kids up on a sofa and tell them to close their eyes and fall backwards and I'll catch you. But I am talking about there are times when we say, no, bedtime is 7 o'clock. Because that is what is right for you. It is what is right for our family. It is what is right for your mom and dad. And parents and children just need to obey that. That is not sinful, children. You have to obey when your parents say it's time for bed. Well, kids, now we get to pick on your dads. All right? Paying attention? Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Paul specifically addresses fathers in this, as opposed to in verse 1, where he specifically addressed parents. So children, you have to obey both parents, not just dad, not just mom. Specifically, both parents are acting together in the place of God to bring you up. But here, Paul is specifically addressing fathers. That's of note, so we need to pay attention. What is he saying? I believe he's going back to the end of chapter 5, where he made it very clear that husbands are the head of the home. Fathers, you will be responsible for how you have raised your children and how your wife has raised your children. You will be responsible for that, fathers. I believe he's addressing the head of the home. So, single moms, he's also addressing you. The same responsibilities that a dad has, a single mom has. They are the head of the home. They are standing in the place of fathers, if there is no father. And by the way, I do believe wholeheartedly that fathers that abandon their families will be held accountable for that. They will not get away from their responsibilities in God's eyes. Remember, all the way back in verse 21 of chapter 5, Paul started this whole section by saying we should all submit to one another. So, husbands, while we are loving our wives, what that means is we are submitting to her needs. We will provide for her. That's love. Jesus submitted to the needs of the church by dying for her. That's what husbands do. And dads, you are not the king of the castle. You are in charge, and you are responsible for leading your family, especially your children. But that doesn't mean that you just get to pass edicts and sit on the sofa and watch football all day. Our children's best interests should be at the heart of all that we do. Dads, we should still be the first ones to sacrifice. If there's one sausage left, and one of the kids thinks, I would really like to have that sausage, well, I will leave that up to you as a judgment call. But it doesn't just automatically mean Dad gets the last sausage. As the head of the home, you are the caretaker and provider. It's your job, dads, to look after your children, to provide for their needs. As the head of the home, you are the protector and the shield. You are there to make sure that nobody does harm to your family. It's one of your main jobs as a dad. Your children should always feel safe when you're around. And if they ever feel in danger, in their heart they should know, I just need to get to Dad, and he will look after me. Because you are standing in the place of God for your children. As the head of the home, you lead and guide your family closer and closer to God with every decision you make, or you are not being a godly head. Every word you say, every attitude you show, every action you make, every decision you take should be leading your family closer and closer and closer to God. It is an awesome responsibility to be the head of the home. And when we don't take that seriously, God will hold us accountable. That's why he is singling out fathers here. He says, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger. I used to love to tickle my kids. And they used to love it for a while, until it got too much. And I remember my mom used to say, Glenn, don't provoke your children to anger. Well, believe it or not, it's not about tickling your children too much. It does, however, mean not making a habit of doing things to your children that you know they don't like simply because you do like it. There are lots of medical terms for people who don't recognize other people's emotions. God calls it provoking them to anger. Provoking to anger is the idea that you are not giving them guidance in the Lord. They are supposed to obey you in the Lord. So you need to be acting in the Lord. That's the opposite of provoking them to anger. And how do we know that? Look at the next thing. But bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. So that is not provoking them to anger. Provoking to anger is the idea that you are not giving them guidance in the Lord, but you are giving them leadership that will eventually lead them to anger towards God. The direction that you are leading them will eventually make them angry towards God. Why? Because they're angry towards you. Not being just in your guidance and leadership, treating your children differently than each other. How many times have I said, in the body, we are all equal. I may be up here talking, but I am no higher in God's estimation, no more valuable, I have no more worth than Jack. All of us are equal. And your children are the same. If you are going to treat them the way God treats you, you need to treat them equally. There should never be a hint that you love one of your children more than the others. Now, I have a brother. Anybody here with a brother or sister knows that your parents love the other one more than they love you, right? We all know that, we think. But we should certainly do our best as parents to make sure that that is only said tongue-in-cheek. And it's not a genuine reality. Because that is not bringing them up in the Lord. That will provoke them to anger quicker than anything. Not giving them godly leadership, but placing expectations on them that are unreasonable. Parents, they're just kids. They are not miniature adults. They don't have life's experience. They haven't learned the things that you have learned. Be patient with them, just as God is patient with you. God doesn't expect the things from you that he expects from someone else. There are things that he expects from all of his children once they have been his children for a long time. But his new children in the family, he is a lot more patient with them. We need to be patient with our children. Provoking them to anger, one of the ways we do that is we expect too much from them. And maybe even more than treating them differently than their siblings. They will be provoked to anger no quicker than by punishing them instead of instructing them. I need you to pay close attention, parents. It is not your job to punish your children. It is your job to instruct them. And that takes discipline. It takes discipline to instruct them, but it is not your job to punish them. Be careful on your motivation. Be careful how you mete out discipline. When it is done in anger, it almost certainly is done for the wrong reason. Doesn't mean that they don't need to be disciplined. And it doesn't mean that the discipline might not sometimes be harsh. But it needs to be for instruction and teaching to draw them close to God, just as God does to us. In Christ, on the cross, he took our punishment. And God will never punish you again. He will discipline you. And he will teach you. And he will instruct you. And sometimes there are consequences for our actions. But that is not punishment. And parents, we need to do the same. We need to be consistent in our teaching and in our instruction and in our discipline. If the kids do something that they know they don't have to do, they need to know what is going to be the consequences for that. Not the consequences one day and a different consequence the next day just because mom or dad's having a bad day. The other day I was, where was I? I was up near Little's, and there was a mom with a pram, kid in it, another little smaller child, maybe 6, walking next to her. The 6-year-old was absolutely having a fit. I was all the way across the road and up the road, and I could hear every word that child was saying, yelling at his mother, calling her the most vile words that you can possibly imagine. Whatever is the worst word you can think of, that's what he was calling her. And then punching her. And her reaction was nothing. Just walking along. That child will grow up angry. That is provoking a child to anger. It is allowing those sorts of things to carry on with no consequence. Parents, we need to take this job seriously because it is the most serious job you will ever have in your life. You are producing and training future adults. We need to bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. That's how you're not provoking them to anger, because they're becoming godly children. They are learning what it means to be a godly child. If you are bringing them up in the Lord, then you are leading them towards a love, a respect, an honor, and a desire for God. Take that job seriously. You may get to the end of your adult or your parenting, and they become nice kids or nice adults. But have they become godly? That's what matters. Provoking them to anger is bringing them up to hatred and a rebellion of the things of God. And sometimes it is not just what you are doing, but it's how you are doing it that will produce that. It's gone quiet in here, hasn't it? These are serious, serious things. As we close, children, pay attention. I've got some applications for you. Are you ready? Look at me. Yep, good. Eli, you looking up here, buddy? Yep, good job. Children, start, even today, by thanking God for your parents. They are a valuable prize and a gift to you from God. They love you with a love that they'll never be able to fully express. Thank God for them. Obey them. Not just on the outside, but on the inside. Work on that. And sometimes it's hard, but work on that. Tell them when you're struggling. And parents, listen when your kids talk to you. And when they say, I really don't like peas, Mom, Dad, they just feel so gross. Say that in a way that your parents can hear. And parents, listen. Because at the end of the day, an adult that doesn't like peas is not a big deal. They don't have to learn how to like peas. They do have to learn to obey, but they don't have to learn to like peas. And there's room for teaching and learning on both sides here. Parents, take your job seriously. It's not your school's job, and it's not the church's job to raise your children into godly people. It is your job. It is your task. It's a hard job, but we're here to help. And it is your responsibility. And God will be there for you, and he will be your teacher if you ask him. James tells us clearly, when you lack wisdom, ask him. And he will give you direction. Parents, don't be lazy. You are the parent and the leaders of your home. Your children are not. They are the smallest, the weakest, and the most malleable. They should not be in charge of making the decisions in your home. Fathers, that's the job of you. Single moms, that's your job, to lead your family. Parents, don't be cruel. Your job is not to punish. It is to lead and teach and guide them towards godliness. Remember, they are just children, and they haven't had all those years of learning that you have. And finally, fathers, single moms, don't raise angry and rebellious children. Talk with them, reason with them, explain to them why you are leading and teaching them in the way that you are. And when they say, I don't really like doing devos before bed, listen and make the decision, but we're still going to do it. And it's time for you to learn through this. That's just an example, by the way. When you have to discipline, make sure you use it as a teaching moment so that it's not just punishment. Make sure they know why they are being disciplined. Make sure they know that you love them through the discipline and that you care about them. And if I can say this in a way that you will listen, don't yell! It is never okay to yell except in emergencies. All that does is promote anger and violence in your children. It's not necessary to yell at children. I learned that lesson too late, but I have learned it. That's why I don't work in Discoverers anymore. Be consistent. Be loving and gentle, even when you need to discipline. Make sure that the discipline hurts you as much as it hurts them. And bring them up in the instruction of the Lord. Bathe your children in prayer. Parents, if there was ever a generation that needed to be prayed over, it is the young ones now. The things that they are going through at 4, 5, 6 years old are the things that we didn't experience till we were teenagers. They are being taught things and told things and seeing things about sexuality, about decisions, that they don't have any concept of how to handle that. Pray for them, and then pray more. Spend time with them in the Bible. Show them why you are raising them this way. Get them to church. They need to be here, just like you do. Be a godly parent so that they have a walking, talking example of godliness to follow. I'm going to pray for you, and I pray that you will pray for each other. And then we're going to worship God.